Hey, hi, hello. It's the LaSala Show. Episode 14, December 10th, 2020. We're almost out of here, people. I don't know how much better 2021 is going to be, but we'll see. My guest today is Mr. J. Steiner. Dear friend. Longtime buddy. And let's just get right into it, because he is on point tonight. And really great interview. Nice to catch up with him. Here we go. Back with the show. Joining us today, longtime friend, Mr. J. Steiner. How say you, sir?
I'm doing pretty good, Jesse. How about you?
Fantastic, man. You know, just getting reacclimated with the Lafayette, Louisiana vibe.
It's definitely a different feel.
Yeah, it's definitely culture shock for my fiance, and you know, she's lived in New York her whole life, so coming down here is man, the portions of food are bigger and cheaper, and man, it's sort of a breath of fresh air before the heat kicks in.
Yeah. How long have y'all been back down here?
Maybe a week.
Oh, yeah. So y'all it's good weather right now.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, come what, next May?
Ooh.
That'll be tough.
The humidity, that kills you.
Oh, yeah. Then again, it's Louisiana, so you may get a hot day in Christmas, around Christmas, so you never know.
True. So what's been up with you, man? What can you tell me about just how this state is running so far? Because I've been disconnected, and I know Lafayette's been giving a lot of shit to Josh Guillory and Edwards, Bel Air, is that his name?
John Bel Edwards. Believe me, I can complain about a lot of different people, but the governor would be not at the top of my list. I think the guy is doing a decent enough job. I have some personal issues with some of his stances in regards to, what women can do to their bodies. But when it comes to the big, pressing issue of, the pandemic and everything, he's definitely been a lot better than a lot of other governors in this part of the country.
Right.
And I think a lot of the flack he's getting is definitely coming from the side of folks who don't want the restrictions, who see it as, hurting business and this and that. But, it's hard to have customers if everyone's going to get sick. So, but I get how they take that step. When it comes to on the local level, yeah, you got Josh Guillory, the mayor president, because apparently that's something you can be called in this world.
Never heard that shit before.
We used to have it, so for those people who don't know, Lafayette Parish, and down here we have parishes, not counties. 6 1, half dozen of the other. We just like to keep it spicy, so we call them parishes. And so Lafayette Parish, like many other municipal governments, counties around the country, when they have a fairly small size and the majority of folks are located in, one city, they consolidate. So they push all of the municipal and local, the city and the county government together. And Lafayette Parish did that back in the 90s. And so we had the parish president for a while, who is basically the mayor of Lafayette, but also the president of the parish government. So then again, all the other cities, much smaller cities and towns in Lafayette Parish, of which there's Scott, Youngsville, Broussard, and Carencro. Those are the other 4. And then like a little sliver of Dusson, although it's kind of split between 2 parishes. They get to have their own mayors, their own little lawmaking bodies. And then you also have all the unincorporated areas, which are governed by the parish government. The difference is in the last 20 years. So we've been a consolidated government system for almost 3 decades. In the last 2 decades, there's been a huge amount of growth in some of those cities that used to be little small towns outside of Lafayette, and now like Youngsville especially, but also Broussard, Carencro, and Scott, especially Youngsville and Broussard. You've seen a lot of growth of, the same kind of suburban kind of growth where you have a lot of middle class, upper middle class folks moving out there. Not all, but, some. And a lot of the support for the current mayor president, but also they've, had to redraw the different districts, and your parish council has almost kind of taken a bigger role, not the bigger role, but a bigger role, because you have so many more people living outside of the city and in other parts of the parish. So then again, most of the funding for the city parish government comes from the city. But then you have a lot of people wanting it to go to the parish, which, of course, these areas, despite there being a lot of people living there, they've developed a lot more and need a lot more infrastructure because there's been rapid private development, but not enough public infrastructure. And so that therein lies the problem, without getting too much into it, which I know I probably did. So,
So what specifically are the most despicable parts of Mr. Josh Guillory's
well, I mean, of course, I'm going to call it despicable. Some other people who support him wouldn't call it that. But the biggest thing that myself and a lot of other people who are in opposition to him take, it's on a few fronts. But as far as the kind of stuff I was talking about, it's this policy, which you see of a lot of people who definitely come from the more quote unquote fiscally conservative side of things, wanting to, make sure we're not spending too much money and cutting spending. Of course, they never want to talk about raising revenue and raising taxes, but oh well. And let's have that conversation. We have seen a bit of, with the oil industry declining, there's less revenue coming in, a smaller tax base. So that could be a conversation to have. The problem is where they're choosing to cut are the very small areas of expenditure, which wouldn't really put a drop in the bucket if we cut it, but they score political points for their supporters, as well as their cutting areas that affect people who do not vote for them, right. And often live in other much more underserved parts of town. If you're familiar with Lafayette, the north side of town, right. which is predominantly lower income, predominantly African American, when they proposed cutting funding and shutting down 7 parks and rec centers, almost all of them were on that side of town and serving predominantly African American residents. And when someone outside of the city parish government did the analysis, they found out that those 7 were 7 of the least funded already. So Jesus. They were cutting some that weren't having the least amount of money going to them. So it's very cut and dry, obvious. There's also the stuff they've done with the libraries. And of course, you have a lot of this is being directed by a group called Citizens for New Louisiana, which used to be Louisiana Citizens Against Taxes, which is a dark PAC money funded group led by a man named Michael Lunsford, who doesn't even live in Lafayette, but he has an office here, much like our congressperson doesn't even live in the district. So there you go. Oh, don't even start on Clay Higgins. But yeah, it's you have a lot of this being pushed around, and it's people always say playing politics, and that's what politics is. But you have a clearly defined thing where you have, for the sake of trying to use money to build roads in one part of town, not another part of town, and basically make up for all of the rapid expansion that took place in one part of town. They're cutting other areas rather than doing something to where the people in these new areas of town, like Youngsville, Broussard, the unincorporated areas, actually should have revenue raised from those areas. Exactly. A, because they pay less taxes, they're not in the city, and B, because most of the money that's going to them anyway is coming from the city, where you're going to be cutting the funding for the people here. So the way it worked in the last election we had for mayor president against that Guillory won against Carleon Labar, I believe that if you look the votes coming just from the incorporated part of the city of Lafayette, And of course, remember, he's the city's mayor, but he's also the president of the entire parish government. Ugh. So the people out, and now, never mind, they have their own mayors too. If you would have counted just the city votes, he would not have won. But because the parish voted, people outside of the city voted for him, he's now our mayor. So we didn't even get, our votes kind of didn't matter. So that's why there's been a push. There was the Fix the Charter thing happening a few years ago, which was meant to split the city parish council into a city council and a parish council, which has been done, but that's not really fixed it much. So now there's a push to deconsolidate completely. Just say, hey, Youngsville, Broussard, Scott, Carencro, raise your own taxes, pay for your own city stuff. Lafayette is not paying for it anymore. You can still have a parish government, but that's going to be, as most municipal governments are, much less funded than the individual city governments. Right. So they've kind of been taking more out than they've been putting in.
As far as Youngsville is concerned, I guess I was working there about 5 years ago before I left. And that place is like a little mini river ranch, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, totally. And a lot of the, we can go into all kinds of historic reasons why you have the development of suburbs going into white flight and stuff going way back to the 1960s in most American cities. But also one thing that drew people to that area in particular was that you had so many unincorporated areas where you could build houses and homes to where the residential taxes and all these kind of upfront costs are going to be much lower. So it was even more attractive for people to move out there and buy or build new homes, which I totally get. The problem is that now that there's tens of thousands more people out there with a bigger voice, yet they're not paying their fair share, but they have enough voice to counter the voice of the city, who is paying more than their fair share.
God damn, that is... my God, that is so corrupt, man.
It's one of these things of when the drainage problem, which they always bring up, is and yes, it's a problem. But the thing is when you when you have all of this private enterprise go out and faster than they should, of course, getting a rubber stamp along the way from people who, are most likely benefiting themselves from it, approving all of these building permits and all kinds of stuff. It's faster than local infrastructure can keep up with. Not to mention, these are all areas that are clearly flood-prone areas. Many of these areas are former agricultural areas, sugarcane fields and everything. And of course, with all this new asphalt, blacktop, whether it be roads, parking lots for shopping centers, concrete foundations, that's creating less porous ground, so it creates more flooding. And then you have them pushing this new idea to dredge the Vermilion River, which the local agency they're trying to push to do that can't even legally do that. It's the Army Corps of Engineers that can do that. But that would only literally kick the can up the road, so to speak, and cause more flooding in the northern part of the parish and in Carencro, where even though Carencro is at higher elevation than Lafayette, when it rains, because of the Bayou Vermilion here and Lafayette is the tidal river, it flows backwards. So it floods many parts of Carencro. Now, it floods the parts of Carencro where you have mostly low-income people living. Right. And no one ever seems to worry about their houses flooding, but they're worried about these, brand new homes where people have only lived for 10 or 15 years in new construction, whereas you've had areas where people have been living since Carencro was called Beaubassin, and they don't really worry about that.
Yeah.
And of course falls naturally, this being this part of the country, although it's not only a Louisiana thing, but it of course falls along not just income lines, but also racial lines too. And that's just one of those glaring, obvious things you can't deny.
Yeah, I don't think the racism is as bad outwardly here, but it's all like internal and just not spoken about. Like everybody seems to act like we're fine with whoever, but then all these laws that you're talking about that are just like subtly repressing people and not giving them the equal funding, and especially like the rec center thing, and even with the displaced hurricane victims from Lake Charles, and Guillory's like, no, we don't want them here, and it could be dangerous. Like all of that is just an underlying like problem that is not really sparkling on billboards, and we're not known for it, but it's there.
Well, and that's the same type of systematic racism that is present everywhere in this country. I mean, it's what the country was built on, so naturally it's going to be woven within the DNA of our political systems. But I mean, you were in New York City for a good long while. New York City has one of the most racially segregated public school systems in the country. Big, New York, big blue state, blue city, but you have that system there. So systematic racism doesn't follow along party, lines when you think about how states, whether they're red states or blue states, it affects everywhere. And that's the whole point. Most people think of racism as just being something of, I accidentally said the N-word, or I look suspicious, or I lock my doors if a black person walks by me on the side. That is racism, but also racism is something much, much deeper, and that's the racism that affects so many black, indigenous, and people of color every day, and of course has historically and still does to this day. I mean, we're talking about Guillory, and the city problems. That doesn't even get to the our own experience here with police violence and racial injustice in the police force here. When we talk about government spending at the local and parish level, you have the area that receives the most funding is law enforcement. By nearly half of all local funding goes toward different law enforcement agencies, yet no one wants to talk about cutting some fat there.
Right.
Whether you call it defund the police or reform or whatever you call it, the thing is if you want to cut spending, look at what we spend the most on and see where you can trim there, rather than doing this nickel and diming stuff for these the great thing about nonprofits in town and things like parks and rec centers and the public library system is that they do so much with so little, because they have low overhead, low numbers of staff. They're able to do so much and provide so much of a benefit, whereas law enforcement, that's a whole other argument for a different day about the benefit or not of law enforcement. But, it's one of those things, it's just the fact of life. You have it here. But the fact that you have, for what, 3 or 4 employees of, let's say, the public library system make, you have what one law enforcement officer makes. So, and that's not even getting into the militarization of local police forces here. Everything from, I think we have 2 tanks, not, the one with the big gun on it, but we have armored vehicles for the Lafayette Police Department. This is a city of 120,000 people.
Yeah, what the hell?
There's no reason to do that, but you saw this wave of stuff like that happening across the country, especially in the last 20 years after 9/11. And it's a way for people to keep spending that money and keep people on the dole. And of course, when you have law enforcement with its history that it does have, naturally, when you give more arms, more weapons, harsher tactics to law enforcement officers, it's naturally going to disproportionately affect low-income people and people of color, because it always has. It's just now the effects are even worse.
Yeah.
But fortunately, they're more visible now because we have social media and everyone has a phone and a camera in their pocket, so we can see these things. And the other side to that, though, the unfortunate part is sometimes we get numb to that. But I think 2 months of us sitting at home not doing anything down here gave a lot of people some free time to get pretty pissed off about things and are at the very least realize some stuff. So we had several protests out here in the street. I was at a few of them. There were much more than that. There were some in Baton Rouge. New Orleans had a lot of them. And it's encouraging to see that. Unfortunately, I see that people get, just like with the pandemic, people get fatigue over that and want to move on to the next thing. And of course, that was the election and everything like that. So it's that kind of news cycle that keeps going on. You can't have attention. You can't keep the light on something long enough. There's always something new to look at. So we get very distracted, and then the problem doesn't get solved.
Yeah, I was just pointing out to my girl the other day, like, man, when was the last time you saw anything about a police shooting? Like, it's been a little while since it was in the headlines, Yeah. At one point during a few months ago, it was like every fucking day there was, somebody getting shot in the back 15 times, mm-hmm. We even saw a Lafayette, Louisiana news story about a police shooting in New York, mm-hmm. local news.
Yeah, it was down on Evangeline Thruway, that Shell station that's I guess kind of near where not Alexander Street, I forget the name of the street, but it's kind of across from where the Holodome used to be. I think now it's a Ramada Inn. But right there, right near the 49 I-10 intersection, there was a man who someone called and reported that he was he was walking around. And then, of course, naturally, over 10 police officers showed up and pursued him. He was just walking. He just wanted to get away and leave. And he walked to another gas station, walked across the street, down the highway to another gas station, and he went to walk in, and of course now they say they were trying to protect the people inside, never mind that several of the many rounds they fired into his body, several of those did not hit him and went inside the store and went through the glass window. So they
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it's
can we hire some competent cops that, worst case scenario, you have to shoot somebody. Can you shoot him in the fucking leg, please? Why does it have to be 12 times in the back? Or
how you just don't shoot people. I never
I
understood the idea that if a man, who's unarmed, if you can shoot him in the back. I've seen my fair share of westerns. That's a hang 'em high offense, man. You shoot an unarmed man in the back. That's just dirty.
That's some dirty shit.
But then again, you have a system where, when you look nationally, police officers who use lethal force are rarely, if ever, successfully prosecuted. It's minuscule, the percentage of cops who face any sort of not just on the job discipline. That would be something, but there's not even that, much less judicial consequences, much less legal consequences that they have. There's only in all these police shootings that have been in the news the past several years, and that's the thing, they've been in the news the past several years, they've been happening, and they're still happening, even though they don't get on the news. It seems like, it went away. No, the problem is still happening. Go talk to people who live that threat every day. But then again, we have a mayor-president who, at first and still, he tried to change his tune, but he showed very little sympathy for the man who was killed, the man who was murdered by police, and his family and his friends who were protesting in the streets. He said the cops were justified without even, that, or the next day, without really having any evidence to say that.
Yeah.
He just came right out in support of him. And then, of course, a week or two later, when a woman went to go speak to Josh Guillory at his home and stood outside, lit up a grill, barbecued some weenies to have a little interaction with him.
Yes.
He went on TV saying his children and his family were threatened because someone was barbecuing outside his house. There was someone who had 12 to I think 18 bullets shot through his body, and apparently that was justified. But your family feels threatened when a really nice lady, I've met her several times. She's a sweet lady.
Nice.
She's, salt of the earth woman that you kind of meet down here. Actually, at one of the protests we had, her and I we were handling the two grills there. I was making ribs and sausage, and she was handling the chicken. So that's kind of the protest that we had over the summer. With that happening, there was kind of course, we're going to get Lafayette with it. At every protest we had, there was some kind of food being made or grilling being done at some of the protests. So it's people, wanted to get out there and say that they're pissed off, they're mad as hell. But at the same time, we're out here doing this because this is affecting people's family and friends. This is not an issue that's happening in Minneapolis or in Chicago or New York or Oakland. This is happening here in our own community, and it continues to happen.
Right. Yeah, it's God, it's a headache. It's because it'll never be solved. I hate to be so downtrodden about it, but it's just it's never going to go away. I think inherently some white people are just always going to be racist no matter what. And I think also some black people are always going to be racist, and you could kind of say it's justified, but you want to try to get past all that. It's just all these little incidents makes it that much harder, and it's we take 3 steps forward and then 5 steps back, and it's just we're always going to be at the same starting point. If we're playing Monopoly, you just never pass and go.
And the problem you have today, especially when you're looking at law enforcement reform, is that for most lawmakers, even across party lines, that's such a non-starter. They don't even want to hear it.
Yeah.
And it's I get it, but there comes to a point where you have to ask, is that whole protect and serve? Who are they protecting? Who are they serving? And then also the politicians. Who are you protecting? Who are you serving? And it's pretty clear cut who they're serving. You said it won't be solved, but you have solutions out there. People are bringing by many, many different proposals, but no one wants to try anything. And there are things happening in other parts of the country that are slightly encouraging, but all along the way you're seeing it beat back. I mean, police unions have an enormous amount of power. It's in a country that has had workers' unions gutted for the last half century, to where workers have no power. The one union that sticks around and has power is the police union, because it's not really a workers' union. It's a extrajudicial force that backs up. I mean, it's a legal force that protects police officers and lobbies for them. It's more of a lobbyist group than a workers' union. And you have those in every single city and municipal government around the country, so that anytime you try to, change something, even bring up the idea of it, you get completely just pushed out of the room. You don't even have a chance to talk. And then that's not even getting to, like you mentioned, there's also individuals, ordinary citizens who have this undying faith in the goodness of law enforcement because of, I mean, you and I grew up kind of same parts of town, same kind of background. And, we're growing up and thinking like, oh, hey, this is all cool and groovy. The police officers are there just to help you and this and that.
Right.
That's not the reality for many children who grow up in our city or other cities. And I think a lot of people just don't realize that.
Yeah.
When you have a complete lack of, we have so much trouble communicating today, more so than, in the past few, in my lifetime. We have so much to say, but no one wants to listen to each other. And I think there's people willing to listen, but unfortunately, I don't think those people are in power.
Right.
And that's the discouraging thing.
So the COVID mess that's been going on, I don't know, when did it start to affect your life, and how have you seen Lafayette residents sort of take this on? So
I think I always remember, because it was Friday the 13th. I just happened to get, someone hit me in a car accident that day, so that's why it's imprinted on me.
Oh, shit.
But, it wasn't bad. It was a little fender bender, but anyway. But I remember that day specifically because that was a Friday, and the governor he announced that the schools were out for the rest of the year.
Was that April?
March 13th.
Okay.
So there were already cases climbing. Of course, most of that early on was in New Orleans. People kind of forget now, it's been so long, but New Orleans was right behind New York City and Seattle. And if anything, New Orleans was kind of the first big hot spot. It was horrible over there. Of course, what happened a few weeks before all that was Mardi Gras. And you had this big social holiday where people were together. And, the timeline is a little iffy, but a lot of people are now, not just ordinary people saying, oh, but it was Mardi Gras, but actual researchers and scientists are kind of saying that was probably a big spreading event. Because not only as well as I do, the nature of Mardi Gras is you're getting shit-faced and you're not paying attention to who you're around, and you're around so many people. But especially in New Orleans, you have so many people from around the country who come down here. So you likely had people who were coming from places where you already had that present, bringing it down here. And because it got so bad in New Orleans, I felt like, from what I saw here in Lafayette, most people, after they got over the shock of, oh, we got to do something with our kids for the rest of the school year and this and that. It wasn't something like today when the governor says, oh, in 2 days I'll have a press conference where I might announce this or that. It was just out of the blue, and it shocked a lot of people. But by that next week or two, I saw most people really going along with the lockdown, with the shelter in place, with this and that. Unfortunately, that didn't last for long.
Yeah, like you said, the fatigue of just
and
following
it
orders.
wasn't. Fatigue is one thing. Believe me, I'm suffering fatigue from it too. But what you have is you had a lot of people not wanting to, and I totally get it when you say you have to close bars, close restaurants, only takeout. For a city that has more restaurants per capita than New York City, and for a part of the country that, and of course a lot of my friends who make a living in the service industry, not just restaurants, but bars. I mean, we love drinking out here.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, that was in March and April. We were about to have our festivals, our big festival season. This was a lot of stuff being put on the chopping block. And a lot of people were really resistant to it. Honestly, before we had the lockdown here, myself, when someone wrote an article locally, an editorial about we need to cancel Festival International right now, and this was back before the shutdown of schools back in early March, myself and a lot of friends shared this on Facebook and said, this is a dumb idea, this will be over. But we didn't know, you know, and nor should we have, because we didn't have access to that information. It'd be great if you had, you know, a leader who would have shared that information with people, but, you know, we all know that he didn't. But the moment all of that trickled down to the state governments, that's why I give John Bel Edwards props on it. He very quickly got toward dealing with stuff, and I think some local governments in Louisiana handled it better. But in other areas like Lafayette and places outside of New Orleans, you had a lot of pushback against it, starting pretty early on, starting within that first month. And so that by the time you had that first movement from phase 1 to phase 2, people just said, fuck it, we're all going out. We're all doing it. And there was this pushback, and that's when you saw a lot of no mask wearing and this and that. And that stayed throughout most of the summer, which just explains that second spike. People kind of tried to tamp down again, and then now it's back to normal. I mean, you know, their restaurants are open for the most part. They have capacity things, but I mean, most restaurants aren't really following them. Bars are trying to get around different things this here and there. And, you know, it's at a point now where we're so long into it, you can't completely, I mean, you could, but, you know, economically it'd be tough and logistically to shut down everything completely again. So and of course, as we know, when you're talking about other types of disease spread, abstinence only rarely works. So if you instruct people on how to prevent things and how to stop the spread of things, people can go about a somewhat closer to normal, quote unquote, normal life, but still contain the spread. Unfortunately, people aren't doing that. I mean, I'm sitting here talking about how to prevent this and that, and I'm about to say I go to the gym, but when the local gym here in town, you know which one it is, the big one that I go to, I would walk through there when it first reopened. For that first month, I saw that whole first month they reopened, me and maybe 4 or 5 other people in that whole month were the only people wearing masks there that weren't working there. All the employees and everyone was wearing masks.
Right.
And then of course the owner, who's the gym is named after him, he sent out an email that said that, and so people were good about wearing their masks for, you know, and they wear the mask when they walk in, and then they take it off when they're walking down the hall, and then they're working out doing stuff. And it's just kind of very frustrating that you don't see anyone really taking it seriously. Then again, you know, I think I'm one of the few, not the few, but I'm definitely in the minority there for people who voted one way versus the other in recent elections.
Exactly.
It's definitely, and you know, it is falling along political lines, not always, but a lot for the most part. And I have seen different parts of town do it differently. Here around downtown, it depends on where you go. And it depends on whether people are from around here or not, whether they're wearing masks or not. The north side, you definitely see a lot more mask usage, people taking precautions. When you go out to, you know, other, you know, Youngsville and Harry's like that, it's rare that you see more than maybe 30% on a good day wearing masks.
It's the Wild West.
That, you know,
so far so we drove down from Brooklyn, New York, and as we went all the way down the East Coast, you know, Jacksonville, and then got on I-10 to Lafayette, but you could tell, like, from all the gas station stops that we made, once we got below North Carolina, every gas station was just like, mask. Like, they looked at you like you were crazy if you had a mask.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and I mean, you know me, I'm a big fella. I'm not as big as I once was. I lost a bunch of weight recently, but I'm still 6'4". And so every once in a while people give me a weird look for wearing a mask, and I just kind of look back at them. It's hard to give a dirty look wearing a mask because you can't see half your face. But, you know, no one really says. But I've had a few people say things to me like, why are you wearing that? And I just kind of say, why aren't you? You know? But you don't hear that anymore. I think most everyone is, even those of us who are sticking to try and be precautious and wear a mask and wash our hands all the time. I mean, knuckles have bled so many times during this, washing my hands so much anytime I'm going to do something, that it's almost so frustrating that if I got mad and lashed out every time, I would lose my mind. And this is a very stressful year. Yeah. I mean, we had a very contentious election. We had the pandemic. You have the protests that we had earlier this year. You also have the fact that we were already going into a recession before all this started, and it's become much worse. Most of us were out of work for anywhere from 3 to 6 to some people are still out of work. Yeah. It is an extremely stressful time to be alive. So I think that's what leads to a lot of fatigue. Then again, we're talking about people making personal decisions, whether to be precautious or whether not to. But at the end of the day, we could be doing a better job at staying at home and at not going out if you had both, state, but also especially federal government providing a lot more assistance to individuals, businesses, in order to make it easier for them to slow things down. Right. But you don't have that. I mean, they gave us $1,200, and then some of us got some unemployment assistance. That was nice to have. But I was able to get a census job working in August and September, and I had to get off of the unemployment in order to do that. And I was basically, making just about as much, and
risking your life.
Yeah. And it's a tough thing. So I was eager to get out. I mean, I needed some socialization. It was tough. I mean, yeah. I'm a pretty social creature. And, we have done some, like I'm hosting a trivia night here in town. We do it at a venue that's outdoors. Everyone's, I tell people, if your bottom 2 cheeks aren't on the seat, if you're up and moving around, cover your top 2 cheeks, put on your mask. If you're at your little plague party at your table, cool. If those people you feel comfortable with and you're all cool, you can, of course, we're outside too, so that helps to limit spread, but it's still not perfect. So it's tough, but it's, I mean, when someone one night was asking me about it, it's just like, the bar also has a unspoken rule that you got to wear pants, and I'm not walking in here showing pain. So, I mean, that honestly, me walking in with no pants is less of a health threat than me not wearing a mask.
Right.
So, it's not that hard to do. But at the same time, I totally get people's fatigue on it, and I wish that we had more support top down and top down from the federal government. Unfortunately, we all know, regardless of whether you fall on what side of the political side you fall, you have to admit the dude in charge wasn't doing much.
Nope.
So it's a very discouraging thing to see a complete failure of the federal government, and not just the president, but also Congress
that fucker was telling people to take their masks off. Come on. He was being take that off.
Doing anything. Honestly, I would have been fine with him just freaking out and not leaving his room for 6 months. We probably could have got more done. Shoot, man, let Pence run the show, and he probably could have done a better job, Yeah, who knows? Yeah. But it was for the worst. I mean, it didn't happen because of that, but it was made so much worse. I mean, we account for, 6% of the world's population, and we make up about a third or more of the deaths worldwide from coronavirus. It's insane.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at the next highest countries, it's like when you look at the UK in Europe, they're the worst country in Europe for how hard it's hit them. And you see a similar failure of leadership early on. Fortunately, they ended up getting their shit together, so to speak. Still not perfect, but a lot better than we did. But at every turn, there's just been a lack of wanting to do something. And I'm hopeful about the vaccines coming out and possibly being approved and stuff. But again, what they say, they have 200,000 vaccine or 200 million vaccines. There are 2 doses, so that covers 100 million people. That's only a third of the country, a little less than a third of the country. So that's not enough for herd immunity. That's not enough for this and that. It's going to help, but sometimes it's that thing of when you have this false sense of security. And I think that's only going to embolden people who don't want to follow restrictions. So you're going to see a 4th wave and a 5th wave, and it's just very discouraging. But I think that we're having a new executive branch come in that will actually, do something.
Just
maybe not
anything.
the perfect anything.
Just literally anything.
We'll do something. So I'm optimistic about that. Like I said, I'm not trying to be political about it. I voted for Biden, but I definitely have my issues with him politically. And he's one's my favorite candidate, but out of the two, you pick one.
Yeah.
And then again, I live in Louisiana, so my vote doesn't matter because of the electoral college and all that kind of stuff.
Go.
But all that being said, I do have a lot more confidence in literally anyone else over who we've had in charge.
Yeah, man.
Like I said, I would have been fine with his VP running the show.
Yeah.
I would have been fine with that.
Yeah, it's just like the lesser of two evils, and it hasn't. I guess since Obama, I haven't felt strongly about a candidate. And even Obama had his weaknesses that I wasn't crazy about. Yeah. So it's just when it's such in stark contrast to the great speaker that Obama was, and then Trump comes in and just is like verbal diarrhea every other day on the news, just saying some bullshit, calling people out. He has allegations of sexual assault against him all over the place, the taxes, the fraud. I mean, it's all too much for one guy. I mean, Obama had his few things. Trump has a laundry list.
Yeah, well, it's that same kind of thing of we always knew that kid growing up who was always getting into trouble and this and that. And at some point, the teachers just like get numb to it. And then when someone else would do something bad, they get all the wrath of it because they had all this anger built up for this one kid, and then it comes out. So, I mean, that's a tenuous analogy at best, but I think the reason that he succeeded in his run for the Republican Party nomination and then the White House run, in addition to all the shady shit that was happening with election interference and this and that, and I don't mean people were messing with ballot boxes. I think that there was a lot of interference online and through social media to sway people's votes. I'm not saying that people were going and fucking them up with actual votes, but then again. You had a lot of people who just wanted something different. And then you also had a lot of people who, turns out for many people in this country, 8 years of a black man in charge of the country really got them hot and got them wanting to do something about it. And so, when you follow that with, and like I said, I have plenty of stuff I can complain about Hillary Clinton on, but when you have what would have been the first, woman to become president if she would have succeeded running. I think that for whatever Venn diagram it is, people who get really mad about a black president probably not going to be too happy about a woman president.
Yeah, they're all the same stratosphere.
There's a lot of intersection between those two circles on the Venn diagram. And I know I'm generalizing, and I shouldn't do that. But it's the same reason that you saw a lot of people. It made me want to rip my hair out to hear about people who were supporting someone like Bernie Sanders, and then when he did not get the nomination, they jumped to support Trump, which me, as someone who studied political science and, led a political organization during my time in college and was very into it and understands the kind of ideological spectrum, whether it be the two-sided or the four, all that kind of stuff, the ideas of, liberalism, neoliberalism, conservatism, all of that stuff. The fact that people could jump from one side, the side of someone who's a democratic socialist, to candidate Donald Trump, made me just want to just give up and throw my hands up. But what it was that both of those people were coming with something that they were saying stuff that hadn't been said. And they were, of course, Bernie had been saying it for 20, 30 years, 40 years, honestly, since the beginning of his political career.
Yeah.
No one wanted to talk about that. But it was stuff outside of the mainstream. And people wanted to, we always talk about, you got to go after the center, go after the center. The outside of the center won that one. And it was people who just wanted something different. Unfortunately, sometimes when you want something different, cool, pick a different place to eat. That's a cool risk to take, But when, say, we're all on a plane flying, let's get a different pilot in here. I'm tired of all these career pilots flying the plane. Let's let someone from the back. Let's let a failed real estate guy who's sitting in first class, fly the plane. Probably not a good idea.
Yeah.
So
I'm tired of all these safe landings. This is bullshit.
Yeah. I'm tired of all these planes not being on fire. What we need is some passion. We need the plane on fire. That'll get us jazzed up.
Well, man, it's been great. I wanted to ask you about your weight loss journey, man. It's been crazy to see you from afar, and just over Facebook and whatnot. And you used to be a fucking big barrel to hug, and I used
Yeah,
to
yeah.
always tug on your beard. And I don't know if I pissed you off with that, but I just loved seeing you every
Oh,
time I
no.
saw you. And now you're some slim guy. What the hell's going on here?
Yeah. So what was it? I guess it was. I started not this past June, not COVID June, but 2019 June, and just I have my best friend and his girlfriend. They go to the gym I mentioned before in town, and he's been into MMA for years, and he was real physically fit, and that was kind of the last few years for him. And it was just kind of like, okay, now that I know people at the gym, I can do it as a social thing. I'd be this and that. Plus, I'd gone, done some life changes at that point. Things were changing around, and I was just kind of feeling kind of sick and tired of being sick and tired. Not to mention that, over the 10 years, from basically my mid-20s to my mid-30s, I was on high blood pressure medication, on high cholesterol medication. I had sleep apnea, which I still do, but it's not as severe. The other medications I'm off of by now. But then I had my doctor tell me, might as well get a blood glucose meter and start monitoring that. And I realized, okay, well, that means within the next 10 years, I'll probably have type 2 diabetes, which I was not looking forward to. So I just decided to make some changes. And I was not trying to go for a drastic change. I was 380 pounds that last June, or the June of 2019, when I started going to the gym. And I told myself, in a year, I'd like to get to 300. I'd like to go down, ideally 50 pounds, but if I could get to 300, that'd be fine. And I got to 300 within 6 months.
Damn.
Or actually, by that December. So by the end of the year, with just 6 months, I had gone from 380 to 300, or just below 300. And then the next 6 months, I went from 300 down to 230. So, 230. So, or 240 actually then. Yeah, 240. So I'd lost 140 pounds in a year. And it was, if I always tell people if I could do it again, I would have done it a lot slower, more gradually. But knowing me, I might not have stuck with it. So, I always tell people, health is not directly tied to your weight and your body size and this and that. For years, my health was perfectly fine. Like my blood pressure was fine. My cholesterol was okay. Could have been better, but no worse than anyone else who lived in South Louisiana. And once one thing started falling apart, another thing started falling apart. And so I knew that changing my weight and changing my lifestyle, and not just weight, but mostly getting more physically fit, making my body work better, not necessarily getting skinny, was the key to it. It just so happens that I lost a bunch of weight in doing that. So I always try to, I like that there's a lot of talk about body positivity and trying to more correctly gauge how we see being quote unquote overweight and this and that, and how we see being fat versus skinny and this and that. Healthy is health. The benchmarks for your health are tied to a ton of different things. I know people who their BMI is perfect, but they have to take high blood pressure medication because they have high blood pressure that runs in their family. So many things are out of our control for our health, but the few things I could get under control, I tried to. So I was cutting calories. I was burning more every day than I put in. I was going to the gym 4 to 5 times a week. I was trying to stick to a 2,000 calorie diet, which for someone who was 6'4" and 380 pounds, that was kind of a stretch at first. But once I started doing it, I think it was about 2 months in when I had my first kind of like, oh, this feels good leaving the gym. I feel a little high,
Right.
It's like, oh, there's that little serotonin drip. It feels good. And it's been the one thing getting me through like those first 2.5 months of lockdown. I got in a real rough spot because I wasn't able to get out there and do it. I was up to walking 10 miles a day, trying to get some exercise out there. And so once I was able to go back to the gym this summer, I started running, which, you've known me since high school. Don't picture me as a runner, but today, like for example, today I ran 5 miles.
Jesus, man.
In 42 minutes. So And it's kind of crazy. Just a week ago, I was or just a couple weeks ago, I was kind of leveling off at 3 miles. And actually in the past 4 days, or in the 4 of the 5 last days, I've run 19 miles altogether. So, it's encouraging. I show myself. I'm not trying to, I'm encouraging other people, but it feels good to do something, because once you kind of hit your mid 30s, you kind of not doing too many new things. And I don't have, kids and stuff where you can there's kids and stuff around. So it's nice to remind yourself that you can still surprise yourself, which is good.
Absolutely, man. It's an inspirational story, and look, I love you either way you come, but definitely I want to see you healthy, and I want to see you around for a while.
Oh yeah, man. I can still act the donkey and stuff. So that part didn't go away. There was always this something in the back of my head when you get so attached to your body image, and took me so many years to be okay with my large size. And it got to the point where I thought that made me. And I was like, no, that's one part of me, but Jay is Jay. So, whatever changes this way or that way, that doesn't factor into it. And like you said, it'd be kind of nice to be around for a while. My sister had my little nephew. He just turned 3 years old, so it was 3 years ago. And that was another thing that kind of made me start to think because my extended family, my mom's extended family, they were never too close to us, mostly because of geography, but a whole lot of other things. So I had a very small family growing up. It was just my mom and my sister, and then that's why I have so many friends, because I learned to kind of make my family out of all my friends. So it'd be nice for my little nephew to have me around for a good long while. So that'll help too. So
damn right, Uncle Jay over here. I love it.
Okay. He calls me Nonk, which is the French word for uncle.
Nice. Well, man, tell everybody where they can find you. What's your Instagram?
I'm on Instagram at bayoublacksmith, because I still swinging that hammer over at Vermilionville. So, Bayou Blacksmith, all one word, on Instagram. You can see, I try to not get too crazy. I do post pictures of, mostly pictures of food I eat, things I make in the blacksmith shop, and me and my nephew. That's pretty much, hey, I put a lot of pictures of him on there so you can see his little.
That's pure. And I want to get one of your triangles. Right. I've seen you.
Oh, yeah.
I want to get one of those for sure. Also.
Yeah, and I have pictures up on I'm cranking them out. So if you see something on there you like, shoot me a little DM, jump up in my DMs on Instagram, and makes a good little holiday gift coming around.
Absolutely. So. Also, plug your trivia night. Where can people come and do some socially distanced trivia? Good
socially distanced trivia. Yeah, I've been hosting trivia nights around town for almost 7 years now.
Yeah.
But I do it over at the Hideaway on Lee. Great new spot. It's been open less than a year now. Amazing food over there. They actually one of the few places that's been able to have live music because they're outdoors, keeping it safe. So that's downtown in Lafayette. I do it every other Wednesday. Our next trivia night will be on the 23rd. So the eve of Eve, we'll do a trivia night out there. So the night before Christmas, we'll have a little trivia night. And hopefully we'll be able to keep it going into the new year. But if not, Facebook, and you'll see the events whenever they come up. So
sounds good. Jay, man, I can't wait to see you in person. But thank you so much.
One more thing I do want to mention, if you're looking for something to do at Vermilionville, where I work, you might see a familiar Papa Noel the next 2 weeks for our old-time winter celebration out there. So.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I forgot you give tours, right?
Yeah. I work out there as a blacksmith. I do tours. I also work for Cajun Food Tours, a food tour company in town. So if you ever have people in town, or you're visiting Lafayette, if you're not from here, or if you're from here and you got people in town, come take a food tour with me for Cajun Food Tours, or come to Vermilionville. I'll show you around the village. We'll talk some cool history and stuff. So I got a whole bunch of irons in the fire, both in the blacksmith shop and with work. So
yeah, man. Next time you come on, we gotta talk about some happier things for sure.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
Well, man, I appreciate it. Thanks for giving me some of your time, and you have a great night, sir.
You too, man. Thanks for reaching out. Glad to have you back in town, man.
Absolutely. And until next time, this has been the LaSala Show. Peace.